They said Riley Monaghan was too emotional, too soft, too small for combat. At Granite Ridge, soldiers whispered she'd never last under fire. Just a desk operator, never a fighter. But in Parwan Draw, 3 bullets and a shard of shrapnel tore into her body. She didn't go down. She rose. She carried 2 wounded SEALs for nearly 5 kilometers through enemy fire, while calling in live artillery strikes by radio. That day, emotion wasn't weakness. It was the reason they all survived. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, and if you believe honor and courage still matter, help keep their legacy alive. The desert shook with rotor wash. Sand whipped across the ridge as a Black Hawk dipped low, searching for a landing zone. Riley Monaghan dropped to one knee, her uniform streaked red. Smoke curled from her rifle barrel. A voice screamed over comms RPG, West Ridge. She lifted her weapon, sighted once, and fired. The rocket launcher tumbled from a fighter's hands. The helicopter cut through the dust and forced its way down. 6 hours earlier, Granite Ridge was quiet. The forward operating base sat carved into the Afghan plateau, its towers catching the pale morning sun. At 05:10, the daily briefing began inside a sandbagged tent that smelled of instant coffee and sweat. Major Cole Whitaker stood at the map board, pointer in hand, reading off call signs. His voice carried the weight of 15 years in Special Forces. Operation Desert Vale, Sector Echo 19. Recon team. Your lead. Overwatch. Set north. Comms. He paused only a fraction. Monaghan, you remain desk side. Fire support logging and radio relay. Riley's jaw tightened. She had already opened her notebook. Pen ready. Her record was flawless marksman's top 5%, artillery math in her head, language scores off the charts. But none of it mattered. Again. She was pinned behind the console. The others smirked, bumping shoulders as they collected gear. One sergeant muttered under his breath, "Good. Don't need her freezing when it gets hot." He didn't know Riley heard. She didn't flinch. She wrote down assignments, closed her book, and carried the weight alone. She was 24, small-framed, 5'3", 118 pounds. People thought she looked fragile, thought she cared too much. She did care. That was why she memorized every elevation mark, every slope in Parwan Draw, every artillery table from Bravo Fire Battery. She never wanted to guess when lives depended on precision. By midday, the patrols rolled out. Dust clouds trailed their vehicles across the plateau. Riley returned to her comms bay. Screens glowed. Radios hissed. Nothing unusual. She logged transmissions, filed reports, adjusted antennas by habit. Routine. At 15:07, the routine ended. Static cracked. Then a clipped voice. Granite Ridge, this is Dagger 1, taking heavy fire. Ambush in Echo 19, bursts of M4 and AK fire bled through the channel. Explosions rattled the mic. 2 down. 1 critical request, immediate extraction. Riley's fingers flew, boosting gain, clearing the feed. Major Whitaker answered from the command shack. Hold position. QRF en route. ETA 14 minutes. Can you stabilize negative? Sir, too many hostiles. We're moving south. 1 man crashing, need fire support to cover. Riley's pulse hammered. But her mind was sharp. She had studied Echo 19 like a second home. She pictured the ravine, the culverts, the North Ridge where fighters would set PKMs. Artillery could clear a path if it came in time. Bravo fire. This is Granite Ridge. Whitaker cut in. Stand by for coordinates. The answer came cold. Copy, but no certified FO at site. Danger close, not authorized. Silence fell for half a beat. Every operator in the bay glanced at Riley. She had the grid memorized. She had the skill, but she had no authority. Before anyone moved, another signal broke through. Any station. Any station. This is SEAL Team 9, we are pinned. Parwan Draw. Grid Echo 1947, 2 effectives. 2 critical wounded surrounded. Need help now. The room froze. 2 units cut off. Rescue team still 14 minutes out. Air support not available. Artillery locked by rules. Riley stood. Her headset clattered to the table. She stripped the spare med pack from the wall and snapped on her vest. Sergeant Paxton stepped into the doorway. Where do you think you're going? Her answer was level, almost calm. South Culvert. They've got 10 minutes, maybe less. If no one goes, they die. You're not infantry, Paxton snapped. Orders keep you here. Riley slung her carbine, checked the magazine, pulled the strap tight. Then tell Whitaker this. I didn't stay to watch them die on the radio. She brushed past him, boots hitting gravel. Outside, the sun baked the ridgeline gold. She unfolded a creased topo sheet, traced the route with a marker Granite Ridge to Parwan Draw, 4.8 kilometers. Echo 19 carved deep, lined with rock outcrops perfect for ambush. She started moving, fast, low, efficient. The desert wind hissed over empty ground, carrying the faint rattle of gunfire ahead. Each step took her further from orders, deeper into enemy territory. Every step carried the weight of one choice, whether caring too much was weakness, or the only reason men would still be alive by nightfall. By the time Granite Ridge realized she was gone, Riley Monaghan was already 1 kilometer closer to the firefight, and she was not coming back empty. The first kilometer was all gravel and dust. Riley moved fast but low, rifle tight across her chest. Heat shimmered, but her breathing stayed measured. Her steps calculated. She chose the eastern line of march. A drainage cut carved by seasonal floods ran like a scar along the slope. To anyone else, it was just another dry ditch, but she knew it masked movement from the high ground. Ahead, faint echoes carried back on the wind rifle bursts, heavier machine guns, the hollow thump of RPGs. Each report told her the SEALs were still alive, still resisting. That knowledge pressed her forward. The radio hissed in her ear. Granite, this is Dagger 1. Pressure dropping BP 60 systolic. Repeat 60. Briggs' voice was strained, fading between bursts of gunfire. We need fluids now, or he's gone. Riley pushed harder. Loose rocks slid beneath her boots, rattling down the slope. She adjusted, knees bent, arms absorbing impact. No hesitation. She couldn't afford it. She keyed her mic low. Bravo fire! This is Granite Riley. Request immediate HE proximity fuses. North Ridge Echo 19. Friendly's danger close, 280 meters. Static. Then a clipped refusal. Negative. You're not FO certified. Danger close, not cleared. Her teeth clenched. The SEALs didn't have 14 minutes. They had minutes, maybe less, and the bureaucracy was already killing them. Briggs cut across the net, voice hoarse but certain. Bravo fire. This is SEAL Team 9 actual. I authorize Riley Monaghan as FO temporary. Put steel on target or we lose everyone here. A pause. Then the Fire Direction Center relented. Copy authority. Fire mission accepted. Shot out. 25 seconds. The clock started ticking in her head. 25. 20. 15. She sprinted through the ditch, boots hammering the parched earth. At 5, she dropped flat, pressing herself against the dirt. The world detonated. High explosive shells slammed the ridge line, showering rock fragments into the air. The sound was a wall, rolling over her chest. Dust filled the drainage cut. Riley forced herself forward, coughing, eyes narrowed. A fragment ripped across her forehead, leaving a hot line and a roar in her ears. She wiped blood with her sleeve and kept moving. She broke into open ground. For 5 seconds she was exposed. A lone figure in desert sun. AK fire cracked, rounds slapping the dirt around her. She dove again, crawling under thorn brush until the slope shielded her. Her comms faltered. Signal bars dipped as she entered the shadow of Parwan Draw. The SEAL transmissions were breaking, chopped by terrain, without a clean line. She couldn't call the next mission. She spotted a snapped radio mast half buried in rock. The base still stood like a jagged spear. Climbing meant exposure. Staying meant silence. She climbed, hand over hand, boots slipping against metal. She hauled herself up. Fire snapped past, one round tearing into her thigh. Shock flared white, but she locked a tourniquet in place mid-climb, cinched it, and kept going. At the top, comms cleared. She keyed the net, voice calm. Briggs, I'm inbound East Culvert, 90 seconds. The tower groaned under her weight. She dropped, rolling, hitting dirt hard, but the signal stayed alive. She covered the last stretch crouched low. The firefight roared louder now. Sharp cracks echoing off rock walls. Shouts in Pashto carried between bursts. She tasted the grit of cordite in the air. Then she saw them. Dark figures crouched behind broken stone, helmets caked in dust, weapons spitting controlled bursts. 2 bodies lay motionless, one bleeding heavily. Another SEAL struggled to keep a tourniquet tight with shaking hands. Chief Noah Briggs glanced up, disbelief cutting through exhaustion. For a second his eyes widened, then he tossed her a battered patch from his sleeve. "You run fire missions. We'll keep them alive!" Riley didn't waste words. She pressed against the wall, scanning ridges. She pointed quickly. 2 PKM nests north slope, 1 RPG flanking west, LZ south flat, but winds unstable. The men nodded, adjusting their fields of fire. No time for discussion, no room for doubt. She keyed Bravo fire again, shift target 60 meters west. 3 rounds, prox fuse, splash in 20, shot out, 20 seconds. The SEAL with shaking hands jammed a fresh mag into his rifle. Riley crouched beside the unconscious man, slipped fluids into his line, pressed her palm to his chest. "Stay with me," she whispered. Steady voice against chaos. The ground shook again. Explosions ripped the ridge. Dust clouded the valley, masking their movement. Now Riley barked. She grabbed the first wounded man, hauling him into a modified carry. Weight crashed against her shoulders, nearly double her frame. Pain flared in her leg wound, but she pushed off, teeth gritted. Briggs and another operator dragged the second casualty. Muzzle flashes flickered in the haze as the team shifted south, step by step. Each detonation overhead was a shield, each second earned by fire and risk. Her comms flared again. Black Hawk inbound, 2 mics out. Need suppression west lip. The pilot's voice was sharp, urgent. Riley looked up, eyes catching the silhouette of an RPG tube swinging into position. No artillery could stop it. No one else had the angle. She lowered her burden, steadied her carbine against a rock, and fired once. The rocket launcher dropped, clattering against stone. She exhaled slow. 7 rounds left in her magazine. Briggs caught her eye. No words, just a nod. She nodded back. The culvert narrowed ahead, funneling them toward the only ground flat enough for extraction. Every meter forward was paid in blood, dust, and the refusal to quit. Riley adjusted the wounded on her shoulders and moved again, faster this time. The helicopter was coming. They had to reach that zone before the door closed, and she was not about to let anyone die in Echo 19. Riley hit the culvert floor hard, lungs burning. She adjusted the unconscious SEAL across her shoulders, feeling his gear slam into her spine. Every step forward was like dragging an anchor through broken stone. Chief Briggs yelled over the firefight. PKM nests still active. North slope. The enemy poured suppressive fire, tracers cutting orange arcs through dust. Rocks shattered where bullets struck, spraying chips into the air. Riley ducked low, using the natural walls for cover. She keyed the net, voice clipped but steady. Bravo fire, adjust north ridge, shift 60 meters, 3 rounds, prox, splash in 20. The battery answered with practiced calm. Shot out. 20 seconds. She exhaled, braced the weight, and pushed forward. Pain lanced through her thigh where the earlier round had torn muscle. Her boot slipped in loose gravel, but she caught herself, shoulders screaming under the burden. Briggs and another SEAL dragged the second casualty behind her, rifles coughing in short bursts. The fight had become a crawling exodus, step by step, held together by will and fire missions. The ground convulsed. High explosives slammed the ridge, throwing dirt and smoke across the valley. The PKM nests fell silent. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Then the west flank lit up. An RPG roared from the lip, streaking toward their culvert. Riley spun, carbine snapping to her shoulder. She fired once, the round snapping the gunner off his feet. The rocket veered, detonating harmlessly against the rock. Her ears rang. She counted quickly. 6 rounds left. The culvert narrowed, funneling them toward the flat ground south. That zone was their lifeline. Helicopter blades thundered faint in the distance. Still minutes out. Enemy fighters adapted fast. Muzzle flashes erupted along the western slope. Bullets raked the channel, forcing Briggs's men flat. They couldn't move the wounded forward without cover. Riley understood. She was the only one with angle and ammunition left. She set the seal down carefully against rock, then crawled forward, exposing herself to the kill line. Her rifle barked in controlled singles. Each shot counted one fighter down, another forced behind cover. She shifted constantly, never giving the enemy a fixed silhouette. Dust clouded around her as rounds snapped inches away. A bullet struck. Impact tore through her right shoulder, spinning her sideways. The carbine slipped from her grasp. White heat exploded through her nerves. She gritted her teeth, snatched the weapon with her left, and kept firing one-handed. Briggs shouted, "You're hit!" She didn't answer. She couldn't waste the breath. She lined sights again, muzzle steady despite the tremor in her arm. Another burst of fire ripped across the culvert. She felt something punch into her side, just under the vest. Air rushed out of her lungs, metallic taste rising in her throat. She dropped low, pressed her palm against the wound, then lifted the rifle again. 5 rounds left. She fired again, precise, suppressing a ridge gunner long enough for Briggs's team to crawl another 10 meters with their casualty. The world shrank to the rhythm of her heartbeat and the click of her trigger. Each squeeze was pain, but each squeeze bought seconds. Then another strike her thigh again. A tearing shock that nearly folded her legs. She fell hard, grit embedding into her cheek. Darkness edged her vision, but she forced herself up on elbows. She would not stop. 4 rounds left. Black Hawk inbound. 1 minute the pilot's voice cut across comms. Rotor wash trembled in the distance, a promise and a warning. The enemy knew it too. Gunfire intensified, tracer lines seeking the aircraft's approach. Riley saw the glint of another RPG tube swinging toward the sky. She braced the rifle, ignoring blood pooling beneath her. Breath in, sight steady. She squeezed. The round caught the gunner's chest, the launcher clattering down the slope. 3 rounds left. Her vision blurred. She could feel herself slipping, strength bleeding out faster than she could hold it. But she stayed in position, rifle steady, body a wall between the seals and annihilation. Bullets chewed the stone inches from her face. One grazed her helmet, snapping her head sideways, leaving blood seeping down her temple. The world roared in her ears, sound collapsing into a tunnel. 2 rounds left. Briggs's voice carried, ragged but firm. "We're at the zone 30 meters. He was dragging the second casualty, muscles straining, refusing to quit." Riley forced herself upright. Her knees buckled, but she locked them by sheer will. She shifted her rifle, sighted the ridge again, and pulled the trigger. 1 round left. The Black Hawk dropped into view, rotors hammering the air, dust billowing across the LZ. Its crew chief leaned out, waving frantically. Gunfire lashed at the aircraft, tracer arcs glinting through haze. Riley planted her feet, steadied the carbine. She fired her last round at the machine gun nest, tearing at the helicopter. The fighter slumped, weapon falling silent. Empty. But it was enough. Briggs's team surged the final stretch, hauling both wounded into the wash of rotor blades. The crew chief pulled them aboard, shouting over the chaos. Riley tried to lift her casualty again. Her arms gave out. She dropped to her knees, body refusing to obey. Blood soaked her vest, dripping into the dirt. Briggs reached her, grabbing under her arm. His eyes widened at the crimson spreading across her uniform. "Jesus, Monaghan, you're torn apart!" Her lips barely moved. "Get them out!" She collapsed against him as the helicopter thundered above, a roar that drowned everything else. The last thing she felt was the vibration of rotors shaking the ground, carrying them toward survival. The operating room lights were blinding. Riley lay motionless under the sterile glare, tubes running from her arms, chest rising shallow with every mechanical breath. Surgeons worked in silence, pulling fragments from muscle, patching torn vessels, fighting against the tide of blood loss. Outside, the corridor was packed. Chief Briggs sat in a chair that looked too small for him, uniform streaked with dirt and dried blood. He hadn't moved in hours. The 2 rescued SEALs, bandaged but conscious, refused evacuation until they heard she was alive. At 2200 hours, the lead surgeon finally stepped out. His scrubs were stained, mask pulled down, eyes heavy with fatigue. She's stable. She'll need months of rehab, but she made it through. Relief swept the hall. Briggs closed his eyes, letting out the breath he had been holding since the firefight began. Word spread across Granite Ridge fast. A comms specialist had carried men twice her size, coordinated fire missions, and survived 3 bullet wounds plus shrapnel. Soldiers gathered in mess halls, whispering details like fragments of a legend. None of them had expected this from the quiet operator who rarely left her console. 2 days later, a convoy arrived. Not reinforcements investigators. Colonel Dana Kincaid led the board, a woman known for her rigid discipline and cold assessments. Her team carried thick files, ready to scrutinize every decision made during the ambush at Echo 19. Major Whitaker briefed them first. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the strain. Specialist Monaghan left her assigned post without authorization. She engaged hostile forces independently. But she also saved 6 Americans who would be dead without her intervention. Kincaid's tone was clipped. Results don't erase insubordination. If every soldier chose which orders to follow, units collapse. The next morning, Riley sat in a wheelchair in the conference room, bandages covering her shoulder and thigh. Her uniform was loose, arm in a sling. She faced the colonel directly, posture upright despite the pain. "Specialist," Kincaid began, "do you understand the gravity of your actions?" "Yes, ma'am. I disobeyed orders." Riley's voice was quiet but clear. Then why she didn't hesitate? Because Chief Briggs said he had minutes left. Because artillery couldn't fire without an observer. Because no one else was close enough. If I stayed at the desk, they would all be dead. Kincaid leaned forward. "You risked your own life. You risked becoming another casualty, forcing more men into danger." Riley met her gaze. "Ma'am, I decided I couldn't live with doing nothing while Americans bled. The risk to myself didn't outweigh their lives." The room went still. The colonel's pen tapped once against her notes, then stopped. She closed the file. "Specialist Monaghan, your methods were reckless, but your results were undeniable. This board will not pursue court-martial." A flicker of relief crossed Riley's face, but the colonel wasn't finished. "Instead, you are being transferred to Special Operations Command for advanced assessment. You'll undergo the most demanding training this army offers. If you pass, you'll join missions that require initiative exactly like what you showed at Echo 19. For a moment, Riley couldn't speak. The words felt heavier than the wounded men she had carried. Finally, she nodded. "Ma'am, I accept." 6 months later, Fort Bragg. Riley stood on a muddy range, uniform soaked in sweat. Around her, veterans of Rangers and Green Berets pushed through the same brutal course. She was smaller than most, scar tissue pulling tight across her side. But she refused to stop. An instructor shouted over the noise, "Monaghan, you've got something these others don't. You don't know how to quit." She didn't answer, just pushed another casualty dummy onto her shoulders and kept running. By the end of the cycle, she had earned her place. Her name appeared on the roster of a newly formed unit tasked with missions where conventional methods failed, and for the first time, her emotions were recognized not as weakness, but as fuel. Back in Afghanistan, Briggs and the men she had saved followed her progress. Letters traveled across the ocean. "You carried us when nobody else could." One note read, "That patch you gave back, I kept it. I'll wear it until the day I can fight beside you again." At the Pentagon, analysts dissected every detail of Echo 19. Reports argued that emotional investment might be as critical as technical skill. Riley's performance became case study material, challenging the old idea that detachment defined strength. 1 year after the ambush, she returned to Washington. Now a lieutenant, scars hidden under the dress uniform. She walked into a briefing room filled with generals and civilians. Maps lined the walls, charts glowing on projectors. She spoke calmly, without theatrics. Traditional doctrine teaches emotional distance as combat discipline. But in Echo 19, what saved lives wasn't detachment. It was refusing to let men die when I had the ability to act. Emotional investment, properly trained, is a multiplier. It drives preparation. It drives resilience. And it drives victory. Silence followed, not from doubt, but from recognition. They had seen the photographs, her vest soaked in blood, rifle clutched in a single working hand. They had read the transcripts of fire missions she called under fire. No one questioned the proof standing in front of them. As the briefing ended, Riley's phone buzzed. A message from Briggs. Now back stateside. Thompson and Hayes are on their feet. We still tell the story of the day you walked out of Granite Ridge alone. They call you the one who refused to quit. She smiled faintly, slipping the phone away. Titles, promotions, accolades. All of it mattered less than knowing those men were alive because she had cared too much to stand still. That night she walked across the Pentagon parking lot, stars faint above the city haze. Her body still ached, the scars never fully healed, but her stride was steady. She knew new missions awaited, harder than before. People had once called her too emotional. Now, special operations called her when no one else could finish the fight. And that made all the difference. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear another story that's just as powerful and captivating, with courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about duty and justice.